The air in the ballroom of the Grand Oak Hotel was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and even more expensive perfume. It was my 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone that should have felt like a triumph. Instead, as I stood there in my silk emerald dress, I felt like a ghost at my own banquet. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, was currently holding court at the center table, regaling our guests with stories of my husband Julian's childhood, conveniently omitting every single mention of me. To look at her, you'd see a pillar of the community, draped in pearls and grace. To me, she was the architect of 1,000 silent cuts. I wonder, as you're listening to this, maybe while you're folding laundry, stuck in a soul-crushing commute, or just trying to find a moment of peace at the end of a long day, have you ever felt completely invisible to the people who are supposed to love you most? Have you ever stood in a crowded room and realized that your only value to the people around you is how well you serve their image? My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a senior forensic accountant, a job that requires me to see the patterns people try to hide. For a long time, I applied those skills everywhere except my own home. I grew up in foster care, which meant I spent my youth being grateful for scraps of affection. When I married Julian, I thought I'd finally found a permanent place to land. Julian is a good man, a successful architect who sees the world in blueprints and hard lines. But for 10 years, his mother has been the structural flaw he refused to acknowledge. Beatrice didn't just dislike me. She viewed my existence as a personal insult to her legacy. Tonight was supposed to be our night, a celebration of a decade of partnership. I had spent months planning this dinner, paying for every detail out of my own hard-earned savings. But as I watched Beatrice lean over to a group of our closest friends and whisper something that made them cast pitying glances my way, I felt that familiar coldness in my chest. She had spent the last hour subtly implying that our success was entirely due to her connections, and that I was merely a placeholder until Julian found someone of his own stature. I caught Julian's eye from across the room. He looked pale, his jaw set in a way I'd never seen before. He was holding a small silver gift bag, the one Beatrice had insisted on bringing to bless our marriage in front of everyone. She had been hinting all week about a life-changing gift she had for us tonight. She didn't know that I had spent the last 3 weeks doing what I do best, following the money. And what I found in the shadows of the family estate was about to turn this elegant evening into a crime scene of the heart. Beatrice clinked her crystal flute with a silver spoon, the sharp ping cutting through the low hum of jazz and polite laughter. The room fell silent. She stood at the head of the table, her smile as polished and cold as a marble headstone. 10 years, she began, her voice dripping with a practiced maternal warmth. It feels like only yesterday Julian was bringing home, well, his first serious commitment. We all know how much I've sacrificed to ensure this family remained a pillar of this community. And tonight, I want to ensure my son's future is truly secure. She looked directly at me then. It wasn't a look of affection. It was the look a predator gives a nuisance. Behind her eyes was a triumph I couldn't quite place yet. She reached for the silver gift bag Julian was holding, but he didn't hand it over. His knuckles were white, his grip like iron. I felt a tremor of anxiety. You see, for a decade, Beatrice had played a very specific game. She didn't scream or throw fits. She used generosity as a weapon. She had helped us with the down payment on our first home, a gift that came with a spare key she used whenever she pleased. She had offered to manage our joint investment portfolio through her private broker, a favor that allowed her to track every cent I earned. But 3 weeks ago, while I was auditing a defunct shell company for a high-profile client, I stumbled upon a familiar name, Beatrice Sterling Thorne. As a forensic accountant, I'm trained to see the story the numbers are telling, and Beatrice's story was one of systematic theft. She hadn't been managing our investments. She had been siphoning them. Over the last 5 years, nearly $400,000 of our combined savings, money intended for the children we hoped to have, for the retirement we dreamed of, had been diverted into an offshore account to cover her own spiraling gambling debts and a failing boutique hotel she owned in secret. I looked at Julian. He knew. I had shown him the spreadsheets, the wire transfers, and the forged signatures where she had mimicked his handwriting to authorize the loans. "Julian, darling, give me the bag," Beatrice said, her voice thinning with a hint of irritation. "Everyone is waiting to see the surprise. It's the deed to the lake house. It's time you and Elena had a place that matches your status. Since Elena's career has been so stagnant lately." A few of her friends snickered. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my spine straight. I wasn't the girl from the foster system anymore. I was the woman who had documented every single penny she had stolen. I held the hidden factor in a sleek, black leather folder resting on my chair. "The lake house?" Julian finally spoke. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "The one you told me was sold 3 years ago to pay for your medical treatments, Mother?" The color drained from Beatrice's face, but only for a second. She was a pro. "I managed to buy it back, dear. A mother's love knows no bounds." "Neither does a mother's greed," Julian whispered, loud enough for only our table to hear. I reached out and placed my hand on the black folder. The escalation had reached its peak. The gift she was offering was bought with our own stolen money, and she was trying to use it to buy our eternal gratitude. The silence at our table was now a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. Beatrice's eyes flickered, a brief, frantic shudder, before she smoothed her expression back into that mask of regal entitlement. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial stage whisper that still reached the ears of the socialites sitting nearby. "Julian, don't be dramatic. It's an anniversary. Everyone is looking," she hissed, her hand still outstretched for the silver bag. "Take the gift. It's a clean slate, a way for us to move past whatever little misunderstandings you've cooked up in your head." I looked at the silver bag. I knew what was inside. It wasn't just a deed. It was a chain. It was Beatrice's way of ensuring that even if we discovered her theft, we would be indebted to her for her generosity. She was trying to launder our own stolen future and present it back to us as a favor. "A clean slate?" I asked, my voice calm, steady, and loud enough to carry. "Is that what you call it, Beatrice? When you use the $400,000 you embezzled from our joint retirement fund to buy a property you then gift back to us? That's not a gift. That's a circular transaction. In my profession, we call it money laundering." A gasp rippled through the table. The woman to Beatrice's left, a local judge's wife, nearly dropped her wineglass. Beatrice stiffened, her neck turning a blotchy, angry red. "Elena, you've always had such a vivid imagination," Beatrice sneered, her composure finally fracturing. "This is why you'll never truly fit in. You see conspiracies where there is only family loyalty. Julian, are you really going to let this girl insult me in public? After everything I've done to build your career?" Julian didn't look at her. He looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years, there was no shadow of doubt in his eyes. He reached into the silver bag, but he didn't pull out a deed. He pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope. "You're right, Mother," Julian said, his voice ringing out across the ballroom. "It is time to talk about what you've done. You didn't build my career. You leveraged it. You used my name to secure loans Elena and I never authorized. You used our credit to float your failing boutique hotel while telling us you were investing our savings for our future children." Beatrice let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "And what are you going to do? Sue your own mother? Over a few accounting discrepancies? I gave you life, Julian. I am this family." She felt untouchable. She truly believed that the sanctity of family was a shield that could deflect any crime. She thought my background made me weak, that I would value a mother figure so much I'd let her bleed us dry just to keep the seat at the table. What she didn't realize was that, as a forensic accountant, I don't just find the money, I find the intent. And I had spent the last 48 hours with Julian and our attorney, mapping out the hidden factor that would strip that shield away forever. "It's more than a discrepancy, Beatrice," I said, opening the black leather folder on my lap. I pulled out a series of photographs, not of the lake house, but of the secret meetings she'd had with a known predatory lender to whom she had signed over Julian's architectural firm as collateral. The room went deathly quiet. Julian held up the envelope from the silver bag. "This isn't the deed, Mother," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "And it isn't a gift." Julian didn't just hand her the envelope. He laid it on the white linen tablecloth between them like a boundary line that could never be crossed again. Beatrice's hand trembled as she reached for it, her eyes darting around the room, realizing for the first time that the audience she had cultivated for decades was now witnessing her undoing. "What is this, Julian?" she whispered, her voice finally losing its regal edge. "Some kind of legal threat over a family matter?" "It's a restraining order, Mother," Julian said, his voice flat and resolute. "Effective immediately." "And those documents underneath?" "That's a formal demand for the full repayment of the $412,000 you misappropriated from our accounts, plus interest." Beatrice let out a sharp, jagged laugh, looking toward her friends for support. "A restraining order? Against your own mother? For trying to help you? You're making a scene, Julian. You're embarrassing yourself." I leaned forward then, my voice a calm contrast to her rising hysteria. "It's not just a restraining order, Beatrice. It's a notice of a pending criminal investigation. You see, when you forged Julian's signature on those loan documents for the boutique hotel, you didn't just borrow from family, you committed bank fraud. And since I'm a forensic accountant, I didn't just find the trail. I turned the entire dossier over to the district attorney's office this morning." The gasps in the room were no longer quiet. The pillar of the community was crumbling in real time. The woman who had spent 10 years making me feel like an interloper, a placeholder who didn't belong, was now looking at the person she had underestimated most. You wouldn't," Beatrice stammered, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. "Julian, tell her this is a mistake. I did it for us, to keep the Thorne name respected." Julian stood up, taller than I'd seen him in years, as if a physical weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "The Thorne name is fine, Mother. It's your name that's the problem. You didn't do this for us. You did it to control us. You wanted us broke and dependent so we could never leave your shadow. But Elena saw you. She saw through every lie while I was too blinded by loyalty to look." He turned to the room, to the stunned guests and the silent servers. "I apologize for the disruption, but 10 years is a long time to live in a house built on lies. The party is over." Beatrice tried to stand, to reclaim some shred of her dignity, but her legs seemed to give way. She looked at the folder I held, the evidence of her greed, her forgeries, and her betrayal. She realized that the underdog she had mocked wasn't just holding a grudge. I was holding her entire future in my hands. The reversal was absolute. The woman who had tried to sabotage our anniversary to prove her dominance was now being escorted out of the ballroom by the hotel's private security, her pearls clutching at a throat that could no longer find the words to lie. The ballroom door clicked shut behind Beatrice, the sound echoing like a gavel. For a moment, the silence was absolute, a vacuum where her suffocating presence used to be. Then, slowly, the murmurs began. But Julian and I didn't stay to hear them. We walked out of that hotel hand in hand, leaving the expensive lilies and the poisoned atmosphere behind. The drive home was the quietest 30 minutes of my life, but it wasn't the heavy, anxious silence I was used to. It was peaceful. The silent revenge wasn't about the police report or the spreadsheets. It was the look on Julian's face when he realized he was finally free. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was surgical. Beatrice was forced to sell the boutique hotel to begin making restitution, and her social standing evaporated overnight. The pillar of the community turned out to be hollow, and the community she prized so much moved on without a second thought. She tried to call, of course, first with fury, then with tears, but the restraining order remained a firm paper wall. I'm Elena, and at 34, I finally stopped being grateful for a seat at a toxic table. I realized that my value wasn't something Beatrice could grant or take away. My career didn't just give me the tools to catch a thief. It gave me the evidence I needed to prove to my husband that his loyalty was being used as a weapon against him. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't a loud confrontation. It's the quiet, systematic removal of someone's power over your life. It's the locked door, the blocked number, and the bank account they can no longer touch. We didn't need a lake house or a silver-bagged gift to be happy. We just needed the truth. As I sit here now, looking at the 10th anniversary photo on our mantle, not the one from the disastrous party, but one taken a week later on a quiet beach, I feel a lightness I never thought possible. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who thought they were untouchable? Have you ever had to use the very skills they mock to finally set yourself free? Tell me your stories of vindication in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need the courage to set their own boundaries. And don't forget to subscribe to Silent Revenge Lab for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of the underdog. Remember, the truth always leaves a trail. You just have to be brave enough to follow it.